My son chose his drug-addicted father over me, now they want me to pay for his rehab. My name is Lorraine Whitman. And the day my son told me he was choosing his father over me, something inside me cracked so deeply I thought I would never recover. I remember the way his words fell, not like a blow shouted in anger, but like a quiet verdict. "Mom," he said, avoiding my eyes, his hands stuffed deep into the pockets of his hoodie. "I think I want to live with Dad." The world seemed to stop moving. My kitchen clock ticked behind me, its sound deafening, while my chest tightened. His father. The same man who had disappeared from our lives when our son was barely 10, who left me to carry the weight of rent, food, late-night homework, and broken-hearted explanations. The man who always returned only when he needed something: money, sympathy, forgiveness he never earned. And now, my son, my only child, the one I bled and broke myself to raise, was choosing him over me. I tried to swallow down my disbelief. "Jason," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You can't be serious. You know what he's like." He flinched, as though I had struck him, then snapped back with a sharpness I hadn't expected. "You never give him a chance, Mom. You always talk about what he's done wrong, but he's my father. I need him." The word "need" stung. For years, I had been the one meeting every need. Shoes when his feet grew too fast, nights awake when he was sick, standing on the sidelines in rain-soaked fields cheering for him when no one else showed. I had been everything. And yet, here he stood, looking at me as though I were the enemy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, the glow of the lamp casting long shadows, staring at a picture of Jason when he was 7, his missing front teeth, his lopsided smile. Back then, he would climb into my lap and tell me I was the best mom in the world. What happened to that little boy? How had he slipped from my arms into the grasp of a man who only ever thought of himself? The next morning, Jason didn't speak much. He carried himself with the restless energy of a teenager desperate to be anywhere but here. I wanted to scream, to demand that he see reason, but all I could manage was silence. My heart was already too bruised. When he finally left for school, I stood in the doorway long after he was gone, the echo of his footsteps fading like the last trace of warmth from a dying fire. I felt abandoned. Not by my husband, I had long ago made peace with his absence, but by my own flesh and blood. Later that week, I caught sight of them together. His father, Michael, leaned casually against his beat-up car, cigarette dangling from his lips. Jason laughed at something he said, that open and easy kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. For a moment, it almost looked like they were a real father and son, and my chest ached with a mix of jealousy and rage, but I knew the truth. Michael hadn't changed. His hollow cheeks and jittery movements told the story. Drugs still clung to him like a second skin. He didn't care about Jason's well-being. He cared about the validation, the power of pulling my son away from me. That night at dinner, Jason finally said it outright. "I think I want to move in with Dad." I set my fork down slowly. The clatter of it against the plate was the only sound between us. "Jason," I said carefully, "your father can't even take care of himself. How do you expect him to take care of you?" "He's trying," Jason snapped. His eyes glistened, a mix of anger and hurt. "You don't get it. You don't know what it's like to need him and not have him around. He says he wants to change. He wants me there." There it was. The hook in his chest. Michael had dangled the lure of belonging, and my son had bitten down hard. I wanted to tell him about the nights Michael stumbled home high, the days he left us with nothing but overdue bills and broken promises. I wanted to shout that Jason didn't need him, that all he needed was me. But I saw something in his eyes, a desperate longing to believe in his father, and I couldn't take that from him. Not yet. So I nodded, even as tears burned behind my eyes. "If that's what you really want, Jason, I won't stop you." The silence that followed felt like a coffin being nailed shut. When he finally left with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he didn't look back. And I, Lorraine Whitman, who had endured abandonment, humiliation, and years of sacrifice, felt the sharpest betrayal of all. It wasn't my husband who had broken me this time. It was my son. The house was too quiet without him. For 16 years, I had grown used to the rhythm of Jason's presence, the sound of his sneakers dropped by the door, the thud of his bedroom door when he was angry, the muffled hum of his video games in the late evening. Now, silence pressed against the walls, and the emptiness was unbearable. I found myself wandering into his room more than once, as though I could still catch the ghost of him there. His bed was unmade, the sheets twisted into a knot, and his desk still littered with pens, half-finished assignments, and a picture frame holding a photo of the three of us from long ago. Jason was only 5 in that picture, his cheeks round, his small arms clutching both me and Michael, who had still been sober, then at least on the surface. I remember the day vividly. A picnic at the park, Jason running circles around us while Michael promised he'd stay clean this time. Promises. That was all Michael ever gave. The memories swept over me like a tidal wave. I remembered the nights when Jason was small, and I had to explain why Daddy wasn't home again. He's working late, I would say, swallowing the bitterness in my throat. I thought I was protecting Jason, protecting him from the truth of a father who traded family for drugs, who pawned his wedding ring for cash, who lied to my face as easily as he breathed. When Michael finally left for good, Jason was 10. I can still see him sitting on the porch, knees tucked into his chest, waiting for a car that never came. His father had promised to take him fishing. I watched the hours drag on, watched the hope slowly drain from Jason's eyes until he fell asleep in my lap, his face wet with silent tears. That was the night I swore I would never let Michael back in, that I would protect Jason from the wreckage his father carried wherever he went. But time is cruel. Jason grew older, more restless. My reminders of Michael's failures only seemed to push him further away. To him, I was the jailer. And Michael was the key, the man who represented freedom, rebellion, and the dream of a father who cared. It cut deep. I tried to busy myself with routine. Cooking for one, though the food always tasted flat. Folding laundry that was only mine, the baskets half empty. At work, the other women would chatter about their children, college applications, scholarships, part-time jobs. I nodded and smiled. But inside, my heart twisted. I didn't want to admit to them, or even to myself, that my son had chosen a drug addict over me. One evening, I sat with my sister, Diane, sipping tea on her back porch. She had always been the blunt one in the family. "You should have seen it coming," she said, setting her cup down with a clink. "Kids always want what they can't have." Jason grew up with a hole where his father should have been. It's natural he'd go chasing after him. "Vis. Natural?" I asked bitterly. Michael doesn't know the meaning of the word. He's never been a father, Diane. He's a parasite. And Jason can't see it. Her eyes softened, but her words were merciless. Then maybe he has to learn the hard way. I hated her for saying it, because deep down, I knew she was right. The days stretched into weeks. Jason would call occasionally, but his voice was different, shorter, sharper. He told me his father was trying, that he had been going to meetings, that he was looking into rehab. I wanted to believe it, but I knew Michael. He had gone through rehab before, always with one hand in his pocket, and the other reaching for a fix the moment he walked out the door. But what I didn't expect, what made my blood run cold, was the way Jason began to echo his father's words. "You never gave him a chance, Mom. You don't understand what he's been through. You made it hard for him." That, as if Michael's failures were somehow mine. I sat up late one night, staring at the glow of my phone after another tense call. I thought about every sacrifice I had made. The double shifts. The nights I stayed awake just to make sure Jason had what he needed. The birthdays I made special even when I had only $50 in my bank account. And now, all of it seemed invisible to him. He only saw his father's charm, his crocodile tears, his grand promises of redemption. The betrayal wasn't just in Jason leaving. It was in him rewriting history, erasing everything I had done, as though his father was the victim, and I was the villain. I drove past Michael's neighborhood once, unable to help myself. His small apartment sat at the end of a narrow street, the curtains drawn tight. Outside, Jason's bike leaned against the porch, and I caught sight of them through the window. Michael, gesturing wildly, Jason laughing. For a moment it almost looked like the family we had once been, but I knew better. That house was a trap. On the drive home, tears blurred my vision. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. It wasn't just that my son was with Michael. It was that he was slipping away from me, piece by piece, as though every memory we shared was being replaced by a new version of the truth Michael was feeding him. That night, as I crawled into bed, I whispered a plea into the darkness, not to Michael, not even to Jason, but to whatever force of mercy might still be left in the universe. Please, I begged, don't let me lose him completely. But deep inside, I knew it was already happening. Michael had always been a ghost that drifted in and out of our lives, leaving wreckage in his wake. But this time, he didn't just return as a shadow. He came back in full color, smiling, confident, and carrying a false kind of hope I had seen before. It started with the phone calls. Jason's number would light up my screen, but when I answered, it was Michael's voice on the other end. "Lorraine," he'd say smoothly, almost as if no years had passed. "I think we should talk. For Jason's sake." The sound of his voice stirred an old anger in me, the kind that simmers deep in the chest. "There is nothing to talk about," I said flatly. "You had your chance. Years of them. And you threw it away." He chuckled softly, like I was being unreasonable. "People change. I'm clean now. Jason deserves to have both his parents in his life." Clean. The word rolled off his tongue like a practiced line, and I didn't believe it for a second. I knew his patterns, how he could string together just enough sobriety to convince people he had turned a corner. And Jason, poor Jason, was too desperate for a father to see through it. The next time I saw Michael was at Jason's school event. I hadn't expected him to show, but there he was, leaning against the bleachers, his leather jacket hanging loose on his thinner frame. His hair was slicked back, his smile wide, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. He had the air of a man who was trying to reclaim lost dignity, but to me, he still looked like someone hiding behind a performance. Jason spotted him first. His entire face lit up, brighter than I had seen in months. He ran over, throwing his arms around his father as though the man hadn't abandoned him 1,000 times before. I stood frozen, my stomach twisting. "Mom," Jason said breathlessly when he pulled me over. "Look who came." His eyes sparkled with hope, as if he were showing me a miracle. Michael extended his hand, his smile just a touch too polished. "Lorraine, you look..." Well, I didn't take his hand, I only stared. "You shouldn't be here." "Why not?" he replied casually. "I'm his father. I have as much right as you." The audacity made my blood boil. But Jason was watching us, his young face caught between joy and fear, and I couldn't unleash the truth in that moment, not in front of him. So I turned away, sitting stiffly in the bleachers while Jason laughed with his father a few feet away. I could barely focus on the event itself. Every laugh Jason gave felt like a knife, every glance in Michael's direction like salt rubbed in my wounds. That night, when Jason came home, he was full of stories. "Dad's really changed, Mom. He's been going to meetings. He says he's sorry for everything, that he just needed time to get his life together." I wanted to scream. Time? He had years, decades. And all that time, it was me holding everything together while he slipped further into oblivion. But Jason's eyes were so bright, so full of longing, that I swallowed my rage. Instead, I asked quietly, "And what about all the promises he's broken? Do you remember those?" Jason frowned, defensive. "People can change. You just don't want to admit it." The words hit me like a slap. It was Michael's voice, echoing through my son's mouth. A few days later, Michael showed up at my doorstep. I didn't invite him in. He leaned casually against the railing, his eyes glinting with that same dangerous charm I remembered. "I don't want to fight with you, Lorraine," he said smoothly. "Jason needs us to be on the same side. He needs stability." I laughed bitterly. "Stability? You? You couldn't hold a job for more than 3 months. You pawned his Christmas presents for drug money. Don't you dare stand here and talk about stability." His expression flickered, but only for a second. Then the mask slid back into place. "I've made mistakes. But I'm his father. He deserves to know me." "Oh, knowing you is the worst thing that ever happened to him." I shot back. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Careful, Lorraine. If you keep pushing, you'll just drive him further away. And then what will you have? Nothing." The cruelty in his words took my breath away. For a moment, I could see the predator beneath the polished smile, the addict who thrived on control. When I finally slammed the door shut, my hands trembled. I leaned against it, my heart pounding in my ears. I knew what he was doing. He was pulling Jason in, using his charm and his false promises, rewriting history to make me look like the enemy. And it was working. Over the next few weeks, Jason grew more distant. He spent more time with Michael, less with me. When we did speak, he was quick to defend his father, quick to criticize me. It was as though the years of love and sacrifice I had poured into him were vanishing, replaced by Michael's lies. One night, after a particularly heated argument, Jason stormed out of the house, shouting, "You just don't want me to be happy." The slam of the door echoed through the empty rooms, and I collapsed onto the couch, my chest heaving with sobs. I had thought the worst betrayal in my life was Michael leaving us, but I was wrong. The real betrayal was watching my son walk willingly into the arms of the man who had destroyed us. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. The distance between Jason and me was no longer just emotional. It became physical, a canyon opening wider every day. He stopped coming home some nights, claiming he was staying at a friend's house, but I knew better. I could smell Michael's cigarettes on his jacket when he did come back, that stale bitterness that clung to everything his father touched. Meals grew lonelier. I used to cook too much food out of habit, leaving half of it uneaten. Eventually, I stopped trying. Cereal at the kitchen counter became dinner, the silence loud enough to drown me. Sometimes I would hear Jason's laughter outside his father's car pulling up, the two of them talking like old friends, and I would stand hidden behind the curtains, torn between fury and grief. It wasn't that I hadn't expected Michael to try and poison Jason against me. I had just underestimated how quickly my son would let the venom sink in. One evening, Jason came home late, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad says he's getting a job," he announced, tossing his backpack onto the couch. "He wants to help me get a car. He says he can teach me how to fix one up." I stared at him, stunned by the casual certainty in his voice. "Jason, you know your father can barely keep himself together. Don't let him fill your head with promises he can't keep." Then, his smile faded, replaced by a scowl. "Why do you always have to talk about him like that? Why can't you just be supportive for once?" "Because I've lived through his lies," I snapped. "I know what they lead to. You think he's going to help you get a car? The only thing he knows how to fix is another excuse." Jason slammed his fist onto the counter, making me flinch. "You don't get it, Mom. You don't know what it's like to want him in my life. You had your parents. I didn't have mine." The words pierced me straight through. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. I wanted to remind him of everything I had done, the birthdays I scraped money together for, the nights I sat by his bed with soup when he was sick, the football games where I cheered alone in the stands. But I realized he wasn't talking about me. He was talking about Michael, about the void Michael left in him. And I couldn't fill that void, no matter how hard I tried. The arguments grew worse from there. Every conversation turned into a battlefield, Jason positioning himself on Michael's side before I even spoke. Once, when I tried to bring up college applications, he shrugged me off. Dad says I should take a gap year. He says I don't need to rush into anything. My jaw clenched. A gap year with him? Jason, he can't even manage his own life. Do you really want to model yours after his? Jason's eyes narrowed. At least he believes in me. Lekt. The words hit harder than any blow. At least he believes in me. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. I pressed my face into my pillow, the weight of loneliness crushing my chest. It wasn't just that Jason was drifting toward his father, it was that he was slipping out of my arms completely, and I couldn't stop it. Family didn't make it easier. My sister Diane, ever the realist, said, "You have to let him make his own mistakes." But others weren't so kind. My cousin Carla called me one afternoon, her voice dripping with accusation. "You know, Lorraine, maybe Jason wouldn't run to his father if you weren't so controlling. Kids need their dads no matter what." Her words ignited a fire in me. Kids need stability, Carla. They need someone who won't disappear the moment things get hard. Michael abandoned him for years. Don't you dare tell me this is my fault. But the seed of doubt was planted. Was I too controlling? Had I driven Jason away with my constant warnings, my desperate attempts to protect him from the man who had already ruined so much? I tried to reach out again. I bought his favorite takeout one evening, hoping to share a meal, hoping he might remember the bond we once had. But when he arrived, he barely touched the food. His phone buzzed, and his face lit up. "Dad's outside. I'm going." Vo. I stood in the doorway, watching him disappear into the night, the taillights of Michael's car glowing like two cruel eyes. I whispered after him, though he couldn't hear, "Please don't leave me behind." The nights were the worst. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of Jason's footsteps on the porch. Sometimes he came home. Sometimes he didn't. Each time he stayed away, it felt like another piece of my heart cracked, splintered, and broke off. And when he did return, he came back changed. Not with drugs, not yet, but with Michael's words heavy on his tongue. He repeated Michael's excuses, Michael's stories, Michael's blame. It was as if I was no longer raising my son. Michael was. One Saturday afternoon, Jason finally said the words I had feared most. "I think I want to live with Dad full time." The room spun. My hands went cold. I tried to stay steady, my voice even. But inside, everything was collapsing. "Jason, if you do this, I can't protect you. Do you understand? Your father, he's not safe. He's not stable." Jason crossed his arms, his face set with stubbornness that reminded me too much of Michael. Maybe I don't need protecting. That was when I realized the depth of it. He didn't just want his father. He wanted the illusion of freedom Michael offered, no matter the cost. I watched him pack more of his things into a duffel bag, just as he had the first night he left. But this time, he wasn't coming back for dinner. He wasn't coming back for school nights or weekends. He was leaving me behind, stepping into Michael's world, and I couldn't stop him. The door closed with a finality that echoed through the empty house. I sank to the floor, clutching the fabric of the couch as though it could hold me together. And for the first time since Jason was born, I felt like I was no longer his mother. I was just a bystander, watching him walk into the arms of the man who had abandoned us both. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. I remember because I had just rolled over, staring at the glowing red digits on my alarm clock, unable to sleep. Insomnia had become a kind of prison since Jason left, every night filled with worry and unanswered questions. But the moment I heard the shrill ring, a different kind of dread shot through me. Calls at that hour are never good news. I grabbed the phone, my voice groggy and tight. "Hello? Mom." Jason's voice was frantic, breaking. "You have to come. Please, it's Dad. He overdosed." The words made my stomach twist violently. For a moment, the room spun. What? Where are you? At his place, Jason cried. I could hear chaos in the background, muffled voices, sirens, the kind of noise that only accompanies catastrophe. They're taking him to the hospital. Please, Mom, I don't know what to do. 1. My hands shook as I threw on a coat, keys slipping from my grasp. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to protect Jason. My son was in the middle of the very nightmare I had tried so hard to shield him from. By the time I reached the hospital, Jason was pacing in the ER waiting room, pale and trembling, his hoodie hanging loosely off his shoulders. When he saw me, he rushed forward and collapsed into my arms. He hadn't done that since he was little, since scraped knees and bad dreams. I held him, stroking his hair, my heart breaking with equal parts love and fury. What happened? I asked softly. He shook his head, words tumbling out in broken pieces. We were watching television. He said he was just going to the bathroom, but then he didn't come back. I found him on the floor. Mom. He wasn't breathing right. I thought he was dead. I called 911. His voice cracked. I thought I lost him. I closed my eyes, trying to push back the anger. This was exactly the nightmare I had warned Jason about. But the fear in his voice reminded me that right now wasn't the moment for lectures. Right now, he needed a mother. We sat in silence until a doctor came out, clipboard in hand, his face grim but professional. Family of Michael Whitman? Jason jumped up. That's us. The doctor glanced between us, then spoke in a steady tone. He overdosed, but we stabilized him. He's going to need treatment rehab, long-term care. If he doesn't get it, the next time could be fatal. Jason's eyes flicked to me, wide and pleading. Mom, we have to help him. Please. I swallowed hard. The request hung heavy between us, carrying all the weight of years of abandonment, lies, and betrayal. Jason, I said carefully, I've spent half my life trying to save your father. And every time he threw it away, I can't do it again. Jason's voice rose, breaking into desperation. This time's different. You didn't see him, Mom. He was dying. He needs us. You always told me family looks out for each other. My throat tightened. I meant you, Jason. I meant looking out for you. But he shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. If you don't help him, he'll die. Don't you care? That was the knife in the wound. Of course I cared. I cared so much it had nearly destroyed me once before. But caring and enabling were two different things, and Jason couldn't see that yet. We were called back, eventually. Michael lay pale against the hospital bed, tubes snaking into his arms, his skin clammy. He looked smaller than I remembered, weaker, his once charismatic face hollowed out by years of abuse. But when his eyes fluttered open and landed on Jason, he managed a faint smile. Son, he rasped, voice scratchy. You stayed. Jason gripped his father's hand, his shoulders shaking. Oh, Michael's eyes drifted to me then, and in that moment, something flickered in them, pride, arrogance, or maybe just calculation. Lorraine, he croaked, always knew you'd come. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, my arms folded across my chest, refusing to be pulled back into his orbit. Later, as Jason and I sat outside the room, he turned to me with desperation etched in his face. Mom, the doctor said rehab could save him, but it's expensive. He doesn't have insurance. He doesn't have anything. We need to pay for it. My stomach dropped. There it was, the real reason he was clinging so tightly, the reason Michael had survived long enough to look me in the eye. This wasn't just about survival. This was about money. Jason, I said slowly, choosing each word like glass I might cut myself on. I can't. I won't. I gave everything to raise you, to keep us safe while your father chose drugs. I won't pour more of my life into saving a man who doesn't want to be saved. Jason's face hardened, his tears replaced by anger. So you're just going to let him die? I met his gaze, steady but aching. I'm not God, Jason. I can't save a man who doesn't want saving. He pushed back from the chair, his voice rising in the sterile hallway. You're heartless. No wonder he left you. No wonder. He stopped, but the words hung between us, venomous and sharp. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The pain of his words, the betrayal in them, carved deeper than any wound Michael had ever given me. My own son, standing in a hospital hallway, choosing his father's addiction over my sacrifice. I turned away, my eyes stinging, my voice breaking as I whispered, I hope someday you'll understand. And then I walked out, leaving Jason staring after me, torn between two worlds, too blinded by hope to see the truth. I didn't sleep that night after leaving the hospital. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my son's words replay over and over. You're heartless. No wonder he left you. It was a knife that kept twisting, because it didn't come from Michael. It came from Jason, my own child, the one I had poured everything into. I thought about the nights I stayed up when he was sick, about the years I juggled 3 jobs just to make sure he could have what other kids had. I thought about the Christmas mornings when I scraped pennies together so there'd be gifts under the tree. Was all of that invisible now? Was I only the villain in his story because I refused to keep saving a man determined to drown? By morning, I was exhausted, but Jason was already at my kitchen table when I came downstairs. His hair was unkempt, his face pale from a sleepless night, and his eyes bloodshot from crying. He looked so much like the little boy I used to comfort after nightmares, and for a fleeting second, my heart ached to pull him into my arms and promise him I would fix everything. But I knew if I did, it would mean giving in again, sliding back into the same cycle Michael had dragged us through for years. Jason didn't waste time. Mom, I talked to the rehab center this morning. They said it'll be around $20,000 for a long-term program. If he doesn't go now, he'll relapse. We have to help him. We. He said it like we were still a family unit, like Michael's choices hadn't shattered us into pieces. I sat down across from him, forcing myself to stay calm. Jason, I can't pay for that. His jaw tightened. You mean you won't? No, I said firmly. I mean I can't. Not just because of the money, though God knows I don't have 20,000 lying around, but because it's not my responsibility anymore. I've done this before, Jason. I've paid the bills. I've covered the costs. I've cleaned up his messes. Every single time, he promised me it would be different. And every single time, he went back to the same thing. I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep him warm. Jason's hands curled into fists. So you'd rather watch him die? That's what you're saying? I took a deep breath, steadying the tremor in my voice. What I'm saying is, it's not my job to save him anymore. He made his choices, and now he's living with the consequences. Jason pushed his chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. Unbelievable. You preach about family, about love, but when it really matters, you just wash your hands of him. I slammed my palm against the table before I could stop myself, the sound sharp in the air. Don't you dare lecture me about love, Jason. Don't you dare. I am the one who stayed. I am the one who raised you, alone, while your father disappeared into drugs and left us to fend for ourselves. I am the one who sacrificed everything so you could have a future. And now you stand here looking me in the eye and tell me I'm heartless? My voice cracked. You have no idea how much love it takes to not enable him anymore. Jason froze, his chest heaving, his face a mask of anger and confusion. For a long moment, the kitchen was filled only with the sound of our ragged breaths. Then he muttered, Maybe Dad's right. Maybe you really don't want me to be happy. He stormed out, the slam of the door shaking the walls. I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, my body trembling. I had stood my ground, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. The days after that were a blur. Jason stayed with Michael more often than not, visiting only to grab clean clothes or pick up something he needed. When he did speak to me, his words were cold, distant, carrying Michael's fingerprints all over them. Relatives started calling, one after another. Some were polite, some outright cruel. "Lorraine, you have to help him," my Aunt Marie said, her voice tight with judgment. "Whatever Michael's done, he's still the father of your child. Don't you think Jason deserves to see his father get better?" I bit back the urge to scream. "And what about what Jason deserves from me? Stability? Safety? Should I throw that away for a man who has never given either of us anything but pain?" She sighed dramatically. "You've always been stubborn. But don't be surprised when Jason blames you forever if something happens to his father." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. But her words haunted me. Was that what this would come down to? A choice between letting Michael drag us under again or losing Jason's love forever? One evening, Jason came home unexpectedly. He looked worn, older than his years, his face heavy with something he couldn't hide. "Dad's been talking about you," he said quietly, standing in the doorway like a stranger. "He says you never forgave him, that you made it impossible for him to be part of our lives, that you pushed him away." My stomach churned. Of course he says that. He can't take responsibility, so he blames me. He always has. Bye. Jason's eyes darted away, as if he wasn't sure he believed me. Or maybe he didn't want to believe me. I walked closer, lowering my voice. "Jason, you need to understand your father is sick. Not just from drugs. From the lies he tells himself to survive. He will twist every story until he's the victim. But I was there. I lived it. I know the truth." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of doubt and longing. "Then why won't you help him? If you love me, if you ever loved him, why not give him one more chance?" Tears burned in my eyes. I reached for him, but he stepped back. "Because I love you too much to keep feeding his addiction," I whispered. "Because love isn't writing another check that disappears into a needle. Love is saying no, even if it breaks my heart." Jason's face twisted, torn between anger and something softer, something he quickly buried. "You don't get it," he muttered, and then he was gone again. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, my untouched dinner cold on the plate. Outside, the world went on as normal, cars passing, neighbors chatting on porches, but inside my house, the silence felt like punishment. I had refused. I had stood my ground. But with every passing day, it felt less like strength and more like surrender, as though in saying no to Michael, I had lost Jason too. And yet, deep in my bones, I knew this. If I gave in, if I handed over money to pay for Michael's rehab, it wouldn't save him. It would only tether me back to the cycle I had fought so hard to escape. I closed my eyes, clutching the edge of the table, whispering into the empty room, "God help me, because I don't know if I can survive losing him." I used to think the hardest part of my life was surviving Michael's abandonment. But I was wrong. The hardest part was standing alone, accused by everyone else of being cruel, while the man who had ruined us was suddenly cast as a tragic figure worth saving. The pressure began almost immediately after I refused to pay for rehab. Word spread fast in my family, faster than I could have imagined. It was as though someone had whispered into the wind, and the entire clan heard. It started with Diane. She tried to be gentle, but even she couldn't hide her disapproval. "Lorraine," she said over the phone, "I get why you don't want to do this. But maybe, just maybe, this time is different. You don't want to live with regret if he actually changes." My voice broke with bitterness. He's had a dozen chances to change, and every time he's chosen drugs over his family. Why should I believe this time will be different? There was a long pause, then a sigh. "Because Jason believes it. And if you don't meet him halfway, you'll lose him completely." Oh, that was the knife in my chest. It wasn't really about Michael anymore. It was about Jason. About the fear of losing him for good. But if I gave in, wouldn't I lose myself? Carla, my cousin, was less delicate. She called one evening, her voice sharp with judgment. I can't believe you, Lorraine. What kind of mother lets her son's father die when she could prevent it? No wonder Jason's angry with you. You sound heartless. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. Heartless? I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who raised Jason when Michael left us with nothing. And now I'm the villain because I won't fork over $20,000 to feed his endless cycle? Carla clucked her tongue. You just don't understand forgiveness. I hung up before I screamed. But her words lingered like poison. Even neighbors chimed in. Mrs. Phelps from across the street stopped me one afternoon while I was bringing in groceries. I heard about Michael, she said sympathetically. I'm so sorry you're going through this. But maybe if he gets the help he needs, it'll make things easier for Jason. He needs his father, Lorraine. I forced a tight smile, nodding just enough to end the conversation, then carried the groceries inside with shaking hands. How did they all know? Why did it feel like the whole world had decided I was the executioner holding Michael's fate in my hands? Everywhere I turned, I felt judged. At church, at work, even at the grocery store, people who barely knew me offered unsolicited advice. Second chances are important. Don't let bitterness rob your son of his father. God wouldn't want you to turn your back on him. But where had all these voices been when I was working 3 jobs to keep food on the table? Where were they when Jason cried himself to sleep because his father never showed? Where were they when Michael pawned my wedding ring for drug money? No one had been there then. But now that I said no, suddenly, I was the monster. Jason's anger only grew with the chorus around him. He called me one night, his voice trembling with rage. I can't believe you're doing this, Mom. Everyone thinks you're being selfish. Even Aunt Carla says you're making a mistake. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. Jason, Aunt Carla didn't live through what we lived through. She doesn't know what he put us through. She knows enough, Jason shot back. She knows he deserves a chance. I lowered my voice, steady but firm. What he deserves, and what he's earned, are not the same thing. There was silence on the other end, then a harsh click as he hung up on me. I sat on the couch for hours, the phone still in my hand, staring at the blank screen as if it might explain how my son had been turned against me so completely. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, at a family gathering I hadn't even wanted to attend. Diane had convinced me to come, saying it would be good for me to be around family. But when I arrived, I could feel the tension in the air like static before a storm. The conversations fell quiet when I entered the room. People smiled politely, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. I sat stiffly at the table, picking at my food while snippets of hushed conversations reached my ears. Can't believe she won't help. Poor Jason, caught in the middle. If it were me, I'd pay in a heartbeat. Finally, Carla leaned across the table, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Lorraine, maybe you can explain to us why you're letting Michael waste away when you could be helping him? All eyes turned to me. I felt the heat rising in my chest, my hands trembling. Because I've done it before, I said sharply. Because every time I've helped, it's ended the same way with him back on drugs, and me left to pick up the pieces. I won't do it anymore. Not for him, not for anyone. Carla sniffed, clearly unimpressed. So you'd rather cling to your pride than save a life? I slammed my fork down. I'd rather cling to my sanity than watch him drag us down again. You all sit here and judge me, but none of you were there when he disappeared for weeks. None of you were there when I had to beg for money to keep the lights on. None of you were there when Jason asked why his father didn't love him enough to stay. So don't you dare sit there and call me heartless. The table fell silent. For once, no one had a response. But the looks on their faces told me enough. They would never understand. That night, when I got home, Jason was waiting on the porch. His face was tight, his eyes red from crying. They're right, Mom, he said as soon as I walked up. You're letting him die. I stopped in front of him, exhaustion washing over me. Jason, I'm letting him live with his choices. There's a difference. His voice broke. You don't get it. He needs you. We need you. The way he said it, we made my chest ache. He had aligned himself so fully with Michael that I no longer knew if he saw me as family or as the obstacle standing in the way of it. I can't do this, I whispered. Not again. Jason shook his head, stepping back as though I had struck him. Then maybe I don't want to do this with you, either. And with that, he walked away, leaving me standing in the cool night air, my heart splintering into pieces too small to gather. That night, as I sat in my silent living room, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just fighting Michael anymore. I was fighting everyone. Family, neighbors, even Jason himself. And no matter how strong I tried to be, the weight of their judgment pressed down until I felt like I might break. But still, deep inside, one truth burned steady. If I gave in, if I paid for Michael's rehab, I wouldn't just lose money. I would lose myself. And I wasn't sure which loss would destroy me more. The silence of my house had become unbearable. Every corner whispered memories of Jason, the slam of his bedroom door, the way his laughter used to bounce down the hall, even the faint smell of his shampoo lingering in the bathroom. It was a hollow kind of torture, like living inside a home abandoned by its heartbeat. I told myself I wouldn't get involved anymore. I told myself Michael wasn't my responsibility. But the longer I sat with the emptiness, the more a dangerous thought grew inside me. If I didn't face this head on, if I didn't look both of them in the eye, Michael would keep twisting Jason against me until there was nothing left of our bond. So one morning, without telling anyone, I drove to the rehab center. It was a modest building on the edge of town, beige walls and barred windows meant to look comforting but still carrying the sterility of control. I walked in, the smell of disinfectant hitting me immediately, and asked the receptionist to see Michael Whitman. She gave me a polite but wary look, then pointed me down a hall. I expected to find him broken, worn down by withdrawal. Instead, Michael looked almost smug, lounging on a chair in a common room, flipping idly through a magazine. His skin was pale, yes, and his eyes sunken, but the smirk he gave me when I walked in was the same one he used when he thought he had won. Well, he said, tossing the magazine aside. I knew you'd come around eventually. I stood stiffly, refusing to sit. Don't flatter yourself. I came for Jason. Michael chuckled, leaning back. Jason doesn't need you anymore, Lorraine. He has me. And once I'm out of here, we're going to build the life we should have had all along. The audacity of his words made my hands shake. The life you should have had? You had that chance, Michael. You had it when Jason was 10 years old and you promised him you'd take him fishing and then disappeared for 3 months. You had it when you pawned our things for drugs. You had it every single time I begged you to choose your family over your addiction. And every time, you chose yourself. His smirk faltered for just a second before he shrugged. People change. Maybe I needed time to figure it out. Time? My voice rose despite myself. You've had decades, and now you're poisoning our son into thinking this is all my fault. How dare you? Before he could answer, I heard Jason's voice behind me. Mom? I turned to see him standing in the doorway, his face caught between surprise and anger. His eyes darted between me and his father, suspicion already blooming. What are you doing here? I came to see you, I said softly, stepping toward him. I needed to know you were okay. Jason's jaw tightened. I'm fine. Dad's the one who needs help. Oh. Michael leaned forward, his voice oozing manipulation. See, Jason? She doesn't believe in me. She never did. I spun back to him, fury burning in my chest. This isn't about belief. This is about reality. You've been given every chance to change, Michael, and you threw them all away. Don't you dare make me the scapegoat for your failures. Jason's face hardened. You always do this. You always tear him down. Can't you just support him for once? I wanted to scream, to shake him and make him see. Instead, I forced myself to breathe. Jason. Support isn't writing a blank check to cover up his mistakes. Support is telling the truth, even when it hurts. And the truth is, your father is using you. He's using your love, your hope, to get what he wants. And when he's done, he'll throw it away again, just like he always does. Jason flinched, but Michael was quick to step in, his voice smooth and calculated. Don't listen to her, son. She's bitter. She always wanted to keep you from me because she couldn't stand the idea of me being a better parent. The words were so absurd, so twisted, that I laughed bitterly. A better parent? You weren't even a parent. You were a ghost who appeared only when you needed something. Jason's hands clenched into fists. Stop it, both of you. I can't take this anymore. His voice cracked, and suddenly he looked less like the angry young man and more like the little boy who used to beg us not to fight. I softened, my voice trembling. Jason, I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I love you. Because I can't stand by and watch him destroy you the way he destroyed me. Please, don't let his lies turn you against the only person who has ever stayed. His eyes glistened, and for a moment, I thought I saw doubt flicker there. But then Michael spoke again, low and dangerous. If she really loved you, Jason, she'd help. She'd do whatever it takes to keep us together. But she won't, because she doesn't care about me. And deep down, she doesn't care about you either, not the way I do. Jason's gaze snapped back to me, cold and wounded. Maybe he's right, he whispered. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, my throat tight, my vision blurring with tears. You think I don't care about you? My voice cracked. Jason, I gave up everything for you. My career, my savings, my sleep, my sanity. Every choice I made was for you. And if you can't see that, then maybe you don't want to. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The room felt heavy, suffocating. Finally, Jason turned away, his shoulders shaking. I can't do this right now. He walked out without looking back. Michael smirked again, victory flashing in his eyes. Told you, Lorraine. He's mine now. I wanted to scream, to lunge at him, to shake Jason until he remembered who had stood by him all these years. Instead, I turned and walked out, my heart splintering with every step. The drive home was a blur of tears and rage. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, whispering to myself like a prayer. He'll see the truth. Someday, he'll see the truth. Wait. But deep down, I feared Michael was right, that my son was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. After my visit to the rehab center, I carried a storm inside me. Jason's face haunted me, the anger, the confusion, the way he turned away when I begged him to see the truth. I replayed the scene over and over, asking myself if I'd said the wrong words, if my voice had been too sharp, too desperate. But no matter how many times I rewound the memory, I kept coming back to the same conclusion. Michael had his claws deep in him. Days passed with little contact. Jason didn't come home, didn't call, didn't even text. When I tried reaching out, my messages went unanswered. The silence was deafening. Then one afternoon, as I sat alone at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me to answer. Hello. There was a pause, then a low, slurred voice I knew all too well. Lorraine, it's me. Michael. My grip on the phone tightened. How did you get this number? He chuckled faintly. Come on, you know I always find a way. His tone shifted, dropping the pretense of charm. Listen, the rehab center, it's not cheap. They're pressuring me about payments. And Jason, he's young. He doesn't get how money works. But you do. You've always been the practical one. So I'm giving you a chance. Pay up, Lorraine. 20 grand. You do that. And I promise, I'll stay clean this time. My heart pounded in my chest. You're asking me for money again? After everything? It's not for me, he said smoothly. It's for Jason. He needs his father. You wouldn't take that away from him, would you? I froze. His voice carried no shame, no gratitude, just manipulation sharpened like a blade. And that was when the truth hit me like a punch. This was never about redemption. It was about leverage. Michael had found a way to use Jason as bait to reel me back in. I won't do it, I said firmly, my voice trembling with fury. I won't let you exploit our son to line your pockets. He laughed coldly. Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you. Jason will hate you for this. He already does. The line went dead. I sat there, my body shaking, bile rising in my throat. For years, I had suspected Michael's manipulations. But hearing him say it outright, he was using Jason as a weapon against me, made me sick. That night, Jason finally showed up at the house. His face was pale, his eyes tired. But his voice carried the same rehearsed lines I'd heard before. Mom, Dad needs this. If you don't help him, he could die. And then what? You'll have to live with that guilt. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I set down the dish towel I'd been holding. Jason, has your father asked you to pressure me for money? He blinked, caught off guard. What? Number? He needs help. He wants to get better. Blah. I stepped closer, my voice steady but fierce. He called me today. He asked me for $20,000. And he told me if I didn't pay, you'd hate me forever. Jason's face went red, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't decide what to say. Finally, he whispered. That's not true. He wouldn't say that. Wouldn't he? I shot back. You think this is the first time he's dangled your love over my head to get what he wants? He's done it for years, Jason. Every time he wanted something, he found a way to twist the knife, make me feel like the villain if I didn't give in. And now he's doing it to you. Jason shook his head violently, tears springing to his eyes. You're lying. You just hate him so much you'll say anything. My chest ached, but I pressed on. I wish I were lying. But I've lived this nightmare too long not to recognize it. He's not asking for help. He's extorting us. And you're too blinded by hope to see it. Vix. Jason turned away, his shoulders trembling. You don't understand. He told me he wants to make things right. He told me you were the one who pushed him away. That you never believed in him. I cut him off sharply. Of course he said that. He can't take responsibility for his own choices, so he blames me. He's rewriting history, Jason, and he's dragging you into the story. But the truth is, he left. He abandoned us both. I stayed. I raised you. And now, after everything, you stand here defending him while he bleeds you dry. Jason's tears fell freely now, his voice cracking. Stop it. Please. Just stop. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, to soothe the boy inside him that still longed for a father. But I knew that if I touched him, he would pull away. So instead, I whispered, how do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? Jason froze, his breath hitching. He turned to look at me, his eyes wide with shock. What do you mean? I held his gaze, my voice firm. I've kept quiet for years, Jason. I've protected your father's image because I didn't want you to suffer. But if he keeps using you as his pawn, I won't protect him anymore. I'll tell the truth. To you, to the family, to anyone who needs to hear it. And when they see who he really is, when they see how he's been using you, they'll know I was right to refuse. Jason's face crumpled, torn between loyalty and dawning doubt. If you do that, you'll ruin him. No, I whispered, tears sliding down my cheeks. He already ruined himself. I'm just done letting him ruin us too. The silence between us was heavy. broken only by Jason's uneven breathing. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen, my body trembling from the weight of the confrontation. For the first time, I wasn't just angry. I was terrified, because I didn't know if Jason would ever forgive me for speaking the truth, or if he would finally see Michael for who he really was. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. The silence between Jason and me had stretched into a chasm, one that threatened to swallow us both. Every time I looked at my phone, I half expected to see his name flashing across the screen, begging again for help, repeating Michael's manipulative words like scripture. But days passed, and there was nothing. Until one evening, he appeared at my door. Jason stood there in the dim porch light, shoulders hunched, face pale. For a moment, he looked like a little boy again, the boy who once used to knock on my bedroom door after nightmares. But his eyes carried the storm of a young man torn in two. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." I stepped aside, letting him in. He moved past me quickly, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Dad says you're trying to turn me against him, that you've always wanted me to hate him. Is that true?" My chest tightened. "Jason. No. I never wanted you to hate him. I just wanted you to see him clearly." He spun on me, his voice rising. "Clearly? All I see is you tearing him down. You never give him credit. Never once admit that he's trying. He's in rehab, Mom. He's finally doing something to get better. And instead of helping, you're standing in the way." "Oh." I swallowed hard, steadying my trembling hands. "Jason, do you know how many times he's said that before? How many times he's promised me he was getting better? How many times I paid the bills, covered the costs, held everything together, only for him to walk back into the same pit?" Jason's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. "People change." I stepped closer, my voice sharp with urgency. "Not him. Not your father. He doesn't change. He adapts. He learns the right words to say, the right strings to pull, and then he uses them until you're drained dry. That's not recovery. That's manipulation." Jason shook his head violently, his voice cracking. "You don't know him like I do now. You don't know how much he wants this." Anger flared inside me, but beneath it was raw desperation. "Jason, I know him better than anyone. I know the way he lies, the way he twists things until you don't know what's real anymore. I lived it for years. And now he's doing it to you." Jason's eyes filled with tears, but his voice hardened. "Number. You just can't stand that he's still part of my life. You're jealous." The word struck me like a slap. Jealous. Me jealous of the man who abandoned us, who traded his family for a needle? I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing my voice to steady. "Jason, I am not jealous. I am terrified. Because I see you walking the same road I walked, believing his promises, defending his lies. And I know where that road ends, with heartbreak, with betrayal, with nothing left but ashes." Jason froze, his breathing uneven. I could see the battle in his eyes, love for me warring with loyalty to the father he so desperately wanted to believe in. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "Do you know what your father did the day you were born? He wasn't in the delivery room, Jason. He was high, passed out in a bathroom stall at the bar down the street. I held you in my arms for the first time, and he wasn't there. Do you know what he did when you were 5? He promised to take you to the zoo, and instead, he spent the day selling stolen goods out of his car. When you were 10, he said he was going to get clean for you, and 2 weeks later, I found him on the floor of our kitchen, a needle still in his arm." Jason's face crumpled, horror flickering in his eyes. I pressed on, tears burning down my cheeks. "And now, he tells you I'm the reason he failed? That I pushed him away? No, Jason. He failed because he chose drugs every single time. He abandoned us, not the other way around. And if you can't see that, then he's already won." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Jason stood there, trembling, his face pale, his eyes darting as though searching for an escape. "Stop," he whispered. "Please stop." "I can't stop," I said firmly, my voice breaking. "Because if I stop, he takes you from me completely. And I can't lose you, Jason. I can't watch him destroy you, the way he destroyed me." Jason's chest heaved with ragged breaths. Finally, he shouted, his voice cracking with anguish. "Then why can't you just help him? Why can't you pay for the rehab and give him one last chance?" I stared at him, my heart splitting. "Because helping him isn't helping you. Because every dollar I pour into him is another piece of your future stolen. I won't do that to you. Not again." Jason staggered back, his hands covering his face. He sank onto the couch, shoulders shaking, tears falling freely now. For a moment, he looked like my little boy again, the one who used to curl into my lap after scraped knees and say, "Fix it, Mom." But I couldn't fix this. Not for him. Not this time. I sat beside him, my hand hovering inches from his shoulder. "Jason, I know you want to believe in him. I know how badly you want the father you deserved. But he isn't that man. He never was. And you can't keep sacrificing yourself hoping he'll become someone he's not." Jason didn't answer. He just sat there, sobbing quietly into his hands. And I sat with him, my own tears falling, both of us broken by a truth neither of us wanted to face. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were red and swollen. "I don't know what to believe anymore." My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. "Believe me, Jason. Please. Believe the one who stayed." The silence stretched long, heavy, uncertain. But for the first time in weeks, I saw the faintest flicker of doubt in his eyes, not toward me, but toward Michael. And I clung to that flicker, fragile as it was, as if it might be the thread that could still pull him back to me. For a brief moment after that confrontation, I let myself hope. Jason's eyes had softened, the edge of defiance dulled by doubt. I thought maybe, just maybe, the truth had finally cracked through Michael's lies. But hope can be cruel. It lifts you up just high enough to remind you how far you can fall. 2 days later, Jason showed up again this time, angrier, harder, a wall built around him where that flicker of doubt had once lived. He didn't sit, didn't even take off his jacket. He just stood in my living room, arms crossed, his face set with determination I hadn't seen before. "I talked to Dad," he said flatly. My stomach tightened. "And?" Jason's voice shook, not with fear, but with fury. "He told me everything. He told me how you tried to ruin him, how you never supported him, how you always wanted to cut him out of my life. And you know what? I believe him." The words knocked the breath from me. "Jason." "No," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Don't start. I don't want to hear another lecture about his mistakes. He admitted them, Mom. He admitted he screwed up. But at least he's trying now. At least he's in rehab. Meanwhile, all you do is stand there and tear him down." I felt the sting of tears rising, but I fought them back. "Jason, you don't see it. He's not admitting anything, he's manipulating you. He knows exactly what to say to make you believe he's changed. But it's the same pattern, over and over." Jason's lips pressed into a thin line. "Maybe I'd rather take my chances with him than spend another second being dragged down by your bitterness." But the words cut deeper than anything Michael had ever said to me. My son, the boy I carried, raised, sacrificed everything for, was looking me in the eye and telling me I was the poison in his life. I reached for him, my voice trembling. "Jason, please. Don't do this. I know you want a father, but you can't let his lies blind you. I'm not your enemy. I've only ever tried to protect you." He stepped back, out of my reach, his eyes blazing. "Protect me? By what? By refusing to help him? By letting him die? That's not protection, Mom. That's cruelty." I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "It's love, Jason. The hardest kind. The kind that says no when yes would be easier. The kind that lets you hate me if it means saving you from being destroyed. But he wasn't listening. He shook his head, his voice breaking. Number, I don't want your kind of love anymore. I want Dad's. The room went silent. My heart felt like it shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. He turned toward the door, pausing only long enough to throw one last dagger over his shoulder. If you won't help him, then don't bother calling me. Because I'm done. The door slammed shut. I stood there frozen, the echo reverberating through the empty house. The walls felt closer, the silence louder. I pressed a hand against my chest, as though I could physically hold myself together while my heart broke. I stumbled into the kitchen, my legs weak, and collapsed into a chair. The tears came hot and fast, blurring my vision. For years, I had fought to give Jason a better life, to shield him from the wreckage of his father's choices. And now, despite everything, he had chosen Michael over me. It wasn't just rejection. It was betrayal. In the days that followed, I went through the motions of life like a ghost. I worked, I cooked, I cleaned, but everything felt hollow. At night, I lay awake, listening to the clock tick away the hours, wondering if I had lost Jason forever. Family didn't help. Diane called, her voice filled with concern. He'll come around, Lorraine. He's young. He doesn't see the full picture yet. But I wasn't sure anymore. Michael's grip on him was strong, and Jason's longing for a father was stronger still. Could any truth I offered compete with the fantasy Michael was weaving? One evening, I pulled out an old photo album. Page after page of Jason growing up the toothless grins. The first day of school. The soccer games where I stood cheering alone. In every picture, I saw the life I had fought to give him. And yet, none of that seemed to matter now. As I turned the pages, I found a letter folded between two photos. Jason had written it in elementary school, a Mother's Day assignment. The shaky handwriting read, "My mom is my hero because she never gives up on me." The tears spilled over again. When had that little boy stopped seeing me as his hero? When had Michael become the figure he idolized instead? The bitterest part of all was the isolation. People whispered, judged, offered advice I didn't ask for. Maybe you're being too harsh. Maybe you should just help him this once. They didn't understand. They couldn't. None of them had lived through the years of broken promises, the overdoses, the nights of terror. None of them had watched Michael's lies corrode every bit of trust until there was nothing left. And Jason? My Jason was now repeating those same lies as if they were gospel. I went to bed each night with the same question gnawing at me. Had I done the right thing? Had standing firm meant saving myself at the cost of losing my son? Or had giving in once more been the only way to hold on to him? The answer never came. Only the silence. And so I sat in that silence, alone with my grief, terrified that I had lost the one person I had built my whole life around. I had nearly resigned myself to the silence. Jason hadn't called in days, and when I finally gathered the courage to text him, the message stayed unread. I moved through my routines like a ghost work. Home, dinner for one. Every night I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, wondering if I had lost him forever. But then, one Saturday morning, Diane called. Her voice was tight, urgent. Lorraine, turn on the news. It's about Michael. My heart sank. With shaking hands, I switched on the television. The local channel was broadcasting a story about a disturbance at the rehab center. A patient had smuggled drugs inside, nearly overdosing in the common room. The name scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Michael Whitman. I dropped the remote. The footage showed the rehab staff rushing Michael out on a stretcher, his body pale and limp, his face a grim reminder of every nightmare I'd tried to warn Jason about. The reporter said he was revived with Narcan, but the relapse was serious and dangerous. My phone buzzed. This time, it was Jason. Mom? His voice was trembling, broken. It's true, isn't it? Dad he used again. I closed my eyes, my chest heavy. Yes, Jason. He did. There was a long pause, filled only with his ragged breathing. Then he whispered, "He swore to me, Mom. He swore he was done." I believed him. His voice cracked. I don't know what's real anymore. Oh, I know, sweetheart, I said softly, my throat tight. That's what he does. He makes you believe, even when every sign points to the truth. It's not your fault. Jason's sob on the other end nearly broke me. I thought I could save him. I thought if I just loved him enough, he'd change. Tears slid down my cheeks. I used to believe the same thing. For years. But you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Love can't do that. Later that day, Jason showed up at my house. He looked like he'd aged years in just a few days. His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes swollen from crying. He collapsed onto the couch, his body trembling. "Mom," he whispered. "I saw him, after the overdose." He looked at me and said, "Don't tell your mom. She'll use this against me." I felt the fury rise in me, hot and sharp. Even on the edge of death, Michael's instinct was to twist, to manipulate, to pit us against each other. Jason's hands shook as he buried his face in them. I thought he cared about me, but all he cared about was keeping me quiet, about making sure I didn't see the truth. I sat beside him, my voice trembling but steady. "Jason, your father loves you in his own broken way, but his love is poisoned. It's tied to his addiction, to his lies, and if you let it control you, it'll destroy you too." He looked up at me, his eyes red. "Why didn't I see it before?" "Because you're his son," I said gently. "Because you wanted to believe. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to believe in your father. But now you know. Now you see him clearly." Jason shook his head, tears spilling down his face. "I yelled at you. I said things I can't take back. I chose him over you." I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "You're my son. Nothing you say can ever take you away from me." I was angry. Yes. Hurt. Yes. But I will never stop loving you. Ever. For the first time in weeks, Jason let me hold him. He leaned into me, his body shaking as he cried. I stroked his hair, whispering the same words I used to tell him as a child after nightmares. "You're safe now. You're safe." The days after the overdose were heavy but clarifying. Jason began spending more time with me again, quiet and subdued, but present. He still visited Michael occasionally, but I could see the cracks in his trust. He no longer repeated Michael's excuses, no longer defended him with blind fervor. One evening, Jason sat at the table with me, his voice low. "Dad wants out of rehab. He says it's a waste of time. He says he can do it on his own." "Isai, shaking my hill. That's what he always says, and it always ends the same way." Jason nodded, his face etched with pain. "I know. I wanted so badly to believe he could change." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "Believing in someone isn't wrong, Jason. But holding on to them when they're drowning and pulling you under, that's where you have to let go." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "How did you do it, Mom? How did you let him go?" My throat tightened. It wasn't a choice I made all at once. It was 1,000 tiny choices. Every time he lied, every time he left, every time I had to pick up the pieces alone. I realized one day that I couldn't carry him anymore. That if I kept trying, I'd break. And I couldn't break not with you depending on me. Jason's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, they weren't tears of anger. They were of understanding. "Maybe it's time I let him go too," he whispered. I squeezed his hand, my own tears falling. "When you're ready. On your terms. But know this. You are not him. You are not defined by his choices. You're stronger than that. Stronger than both of us." Jason leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine, a fragile bridge rebuilding itself between us. Later that night, when he was asleep in his old room, I stood in the doorway watching him breathe. For the first time in months, he looked like my boy again, not hardened by anger, not twisted by Michael's lies, but vulnerable and human. I whispered into the quiet, "Please let this be the turning point." But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over. Michael wasn't done. He never was. And the question remained. When Jason finally chose for good, would it be me or the father who had already destroyed so much? The night after Jason admitted he might be ready to let his father go, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea, watching the first streaks of dawn paint the sky gray. My heart was heavy, but for the first time in a long while, there was also a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months: hope. But hope is fragile, and I knew Michael wasn't finished. The call came just after sunrise. Jason answered his phone in the next room, his voice groggy at first, then rising with urgency. I stood frozen by the doorway, listening. "Dad? What do you mean you're leaving?" "No, you can't do that, you'll relapse again. Dad, please just stay." My stomach dropped. Michael had decided to walk out of rehab. Jason hung up, his face pale and stricken. "He says he's done. He's walking out." He stepped forward cautiously. "Jason," he turned to me, his eyes wild with panic. "We have to stop him. We can't just let him go." I placed my hands on his shoulders, grounding him. "Jason, listen to me. This isn't the first time he's done this. It won't be the last, and nothing you do will change him. Only he can decide to stay clean. Only he can save himself." Tears spilled down his cheeks. "But if I don't try, and he dies, what then? What if it's my fault?" My heart cracked. I pulled him close, holding his trembling body. "It will never be your fault. His choices are his own. You are his son, not his savior." He buried his face in my shoulder, sobbing. By afternoon, the news came. Michael had left rehab against medical advice. A week later, he was arrested for possession. Jason and I sat together in the living room when we heard. He stared at the floor, silent, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. I waited, giving him the space to speak when he was ready. Finally, he whispered, "I thought I could fix him. I thought if I just believed hard enough, he'd become the dad I always wanted." Oh, I swallowed hard, my voice thick with tears. I know, I thought the same thing once. But some people love their demons more than they love their families. And no matter how much we want to, we can't fight those demons for them. Jason looked up at me, his eyes red, but clearer than they had been in months. "You were right. About all of it. He used me. He used both of us." I reached across, taking his hand. "He did. And I'm so sorry you had to learn it this way. If I could have protected you from this pain, I would have. But now you see him for who he really is." Jason squeezed my hand tightly. "I don't hate you, Mom. I never really did. I was just angry. Angry at him. Angry at myself. And I took it out on you." Tears blurred my vision as I pulled him into my arms. "I don't care about the words, Jason. I care that you're here. That you're safe. That's all I've ever cared about." For the first time in months, he hugged me back without hesitation. And in that moment, I felt something I thought I'd lost. My son. The weeks that followed were not easy. Michael's trial loomed, and Jason wrestled with the shame of watching his father fall again. But slowly, he began to rebuild, not with Michael, but with me. He started helping around the house again, cooking dinner, even sitting with me in the evenings to watch television. The silence that once hung between us was replaced by small conversations, fragile at first, but growing stronger each day. One night, as we washed dishes side by side, Jason said quietly, "I want to go to college after all. I don't want to waste time like he did." My chest swelled with pride. That's wonderful, Jason. You deserve that future. He smiled faintly, and for the first time in months, I saw light in his eyes. But closure didn't come from Michael's downfall alone. It came from something inside me, something I had been holding on to for too long. I visited Michael one last time, in jail. Not for him, but for myself. He sat across from me, thinner than ever, his hands shackled, his eyes still carrying that familiar glint of arrogance. "So," he said with a crooked grin, "come to gloat?" I shook my head. "Number, I came to tell you something." He raised a brow. "Go on." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You don't own me anymore, Michael. You don't get to use my son against me. You don't get to bleed me dry with guilt or lies. I gave you years of my life, and you wasted every second. But you will not waste anymore. Jason is mine now, not because I kept him from you, but because I stayed. Because I was here when you weren't. And nothing you say will ever change that." For the first time, his smirk faltered. I stood, my heart lighter than it had been in years. "Goodbye, Michael." And I walked out, leaving him to his cage, the one he built himself. Back home, Jason asked me how it went. I simply said, "It's over." He nodded, relief softening his face. That night, as I watched him laugh at a silly television show, I felt a quiet peace settle in my chest. It wasn't a perfect ending. Michael was still out there, still broken, but I no longer carried his weight. And Jason was beginning to see the truth for himself. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer. We survived. I don't know what the future holds. Jason will always carry the scars of his father's choices, and so will I. But scars don't have to mean weakness. They can mean survival. And I've learned something through all of this. Love doesn't mean saving someone at the cost of yourself. Sometimes, love is saying no. Sometimes, love is letting go. And sometimes, love is staying, even when the world calls you heartless, because staying is the only thing that proves the truth. When I look back now, I see not just the pain, but also the strength it gave me. I see the nights I cried alone, and still woke up the next morning to fight again. I see the way Jason's eyes are clearer now, how he's learning to separate who his father is from who he wants to be. And I see myself not as a woman defined by betrayal, but as a mother who refused to let lies destroy the bond she fought to protect. Maybe Jason will stumble again. Maybe Michael will reach out with another promise, another manipulation. But I know now that I can't live in fear of those moments. I can only live in truth and teach Jason to do the same. So yes, my son once chose his drug-addicted father over me. And yes, for a while, it felt like I had lost him. But in the end, the truth won. Not because it was easy, not because it was quick, but because it was the only thing that could survive the weight of all the lies. If you're listening to this, maybe you've faced a betrayal of your own. Maybe you've had to choose between saving someone else and saving yourself. I want you to know, it's not heartless to say no. It's not cruel to let go. Sometimes, it's the bravest thing you'll ever do. And if my story has shown you anything, let it be this. Staying true to yourself is the only way to truly stay for the ones who matter.